Welcome to Veteran Resource Podcast, where you will meet nonprofit organizations focused on improving the lives of veterans and their family members. Here is your host, Jeremy Paris.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 21 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. Today's guest is Eric Kazmierczak from Resurrecting Lives Foundation. It's a great organization helping veterans with traumatic brain injury. And we're going to get into it in just a minute. But first, I wanted to go over, as usual, some of the great reviews that have come in. We have one from Laura Moore who says, "Awesome podcast. This is a must listen to all Americans." And my buddy over at Pop Smoke says, "Awesome job. It's always great to see veterans helping veterans. High quality podcast." And Sue Monhat says, "Very special support. I'm so thrilled that this podcast exists. Jeremy has put a great show together for a very special group of people. I hope this will help many." Thank you so much for all of these great reviews. And by the way, we currently have 97 reviews in. 97. That's so awesome. I would really like to hit 100 this week. So if you have not left a review, I invite you to go to veteranpodcast.com/iTunes. You can listen to all the episodes there, and you can leave a rating and review, and I will be reading it on a future episode. All right, let's get into the interview here. We've got Eric Kazmierczak. He began his new mission as Director of Operations for the Resurrecting Lives Foundation in August 2014. Eric was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. In October of 1993, he joined the Marine Corps and started his career as an Infantry Rifleman with his first tour of duty at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. From this beginning, he would progress through the Marine Corps ranks and retire as a Staff Sergeant. During his time in the Marine Corps, he held numerous leadership positions at all levels of command. During his Marine Corps career, Eric would participate in operations in Bosnia, Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti, Riverine operations with UNITAS in South America, volunteer for recruiting duty in Cleveland, Ohio, where he was meritoriously promoted to Staff Sergeant in 2001. In 2005 and 2006, Eric would complete 2 combat tours as an Infantry Platoon Sergeant to eastern Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Finally, he would serve as Staff Non-Commissioned Officer in charge of the Command and Operations Center, Marine Pacific Command, and Operations Chief for the 3rd Marine Regiment in Hawaii. In 2010, he retired from active duty Marine Corps. Eric's personal decorations include the Navy Commendation Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, and Combat Action Ribbon. After being retired from the Marine Corps, Eric went to work as a local warrior care coordinator, assisting veterans with TBI and PTSD. He provided non-medical care to combat and non-combatant wounded by assisting and facilitating their transition to civilian life. All right, let's get right into the interview. Eric, welcome to the Veteran Resource Podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Outstanding. Now, I got the name of your organization from Chris Samples. He's the host of the Journey of Success podcast, and I kind of wanted to give him a little shout out here for introducing me and telling me about this organization. As soon as he did, I went and I looked it up, and I said, yep, absolutely, this is one that I need to have on the podcast. So very, very thankful for that.
Great.
And Eric, before we start talking a little bit more about you, I'd like to hear kind of just a brief summary of what Resurrecting Lives Foundation is.
Here at Resurrecting Lives Foundation, what we do is we want to get an opportunity to basically change the way that the veterans transition from those military installations into the civilian sectors. I mean, in a nutshell, that's exactly what we want to do here at Resurrecting Lives Foundation.
Excellent. And we're going to dig in a lot more into that. But first, I wanted to find out a little bit more about you, get a little brief history prior to you joining up with Resurrecting Lives Foundation. Can you tell me some of your backstory?
I joined the Marine Corps in 1993 as an infantryman. I did about 17 years in the Marine Corps. During that time, I was pretty much an infantryman. That was my job title throughout the Marine Corps. The only time that I deferred away from that was in 99 to 2000, 2002, 2003. I was a recruiter out here in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
After that, I returned back to the fleet as an infantryman. I was in 0311 as an infantryman in the Marine Corps, 0369 as an infantry platoon sergeant. So I went back to the infantry, and then deployed in 2004 and 2006 over to Afghanistan, and I came back shortly after that. Probably about I don't know 3 maybe 4 months after that, I started having some issues, and I ended up having a stroke, which
Wow.
ended my career prematurely, as you might say.
Wow. And so when you got out, did you have some difficulties with transitioning out of the military?
Yeah, the thing with transition is that I was almost 40 years old when I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, and I had a really difficult time. The fact that had suffered a stroke, I'd lost mobility in my arms and face. I had some memory issues, with TBI issues, traumatic brain injury issues, where I couldn't see properly, I couldn't speak properly, and for several years I was in physical therapy and rehabilitation, and then literally. It just seemed like overnight, one day, all of a sudden, everything just kind of came back to me. And I literally went from what I felt as being a zero to a hero all of a sudden. Kind of got back all my properties and everything.
Oh, wow.
And it was really, really something. And, I quickly realized that, being an older gentleman getting out of the military and trying to go through the system, transitioning from being in the military out into the civilian sector, that it was extremely, extremely difficult. You get a lot of guidance. You get a lot of, people kind of telling you what you need to do and where you need to go while you're in the military. And then, you get out and there's really nobody there anymore. And it makes it really difficult. And I could just imagine, being in the military as long as I was, and having difficulties, what it might be for some young veteran who was getting out, who had only been in for a few years, and knew nothing else outside of going to school and having mom and dad tell them what they need to do, and going to the military and having them tell them what to do, and then get out and have nothing. And then God forbid if they, on top of that, have some type of wound, whatever it may be, whether they're missing a limb or they have traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder. So, I quickly realized that that must be terribly difficult for them if it was so difficult for me.
Right. When you got out, did you get connected with any other organizations or anything like that?
When I got out, I was part of the Wounded Warrior Regiment. Wounded Warriors, not to be confused with Wounded Warrior Projects, but the Marine Corps Wounded Warriors out in Hawaii with 3rd Marine Division. And so I was aware of their function. And when I returned back to Ohio, I kind of sought them out and hooked up with one of the disabled injury service officers out here for the Marine Corps. And they were kind of helpful and guided me through the system. And matter of fact, I did some work with them voluntarily wise for a few years, doing some non-medical case working and things like that for a couple of years. And but they were able to kind of lead me in the right direction, get down to the VA, fill out my 1010 EZs, things that I needed to do down there to kind of get on the right track.
Right, right. Taking a step back, I'm just curious, was the military like always the plan for you when you were growing up?
Yes, my dad, he was a Marine for a short time, and he always kind of pushed it on me. My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps. My grandfather, or my dad's grandfather, he was in the Marine Corps and was out on was in Iwo Jima and all that kind of deal. So yeah, I knew I was going to do the military. It just seemed the right thing for me, and I really enjoyed the that path. So I knew that was what I was going to do.
Excellent. And that answers some of my other questions there too about having any other military ties. It sounds like you had a lot of military ties. So
yeah, my my brother, it's kind of funny because my brother he came in about a year or two after I did, and well, a few years after I did, and he was over in Iraq, and I was over in Afghanistan. So we kind of fought on different sides of the world there. So it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to start talking a little bit more about the organization now. How did you get hooked up with Resurrecting Lives Foundation?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I was working with the disc out here for the Marine Corps, just on a voluntary basis, and he contacted me one evening and said that Dr. Chris Ann Gordon, who I didn't even know who she was at the time, had contacted him because they had done some work previously together, and she said, I really'd like to have a veteran, if possible, maybe a Marine, to come out here and help me because I'm doing everything on my own, and I need some assistance. And so that Marine called me, and he says, "Hey," he says, "can you go over there and talk to Dr. Gordon at the Marysville Hospital?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "That's right down the road for me. It's not a problem." So I went over there the following day and sat down, and she started talking to me about Resurrecting Lives Foundation and all the great things that they've been doing, and how she's very passionate, very motivated about changing the way the veterans transition out of the military and traumatic brain injury and what it was and she says, "Look, I'd like you to get involved and come in and help me." And I says, "Okay." She says, "Well, I've given you a lot of information, so take it home, let it digest, and get back with me." And I says, "Okay." So I walked out and went back home, and there was, there was a lot to it. And I went home and I sat down, and it was funny because, literally within maybe 3 or 4 hours, I'd gotten an email back from her. And she says to something to the fact of, "Have you made a decision yet? Because if you haven't, I'm going to have to go find somebody else because I need somebody now." So it was kind of funny.
Go ahead and take your time. How about now?
Yeah, exactly. She's 2 hours, she's sitting there just jabbing me with all this information. And I'm like, wow.
Well, it must have been some good information because you decided to accept. And,
well, there's very few people, honestly, that I think could talk to Dr. Gordon and not be motivated and want to get involved once they've spoken to her. She's extremely passionate about this program.
And you said that you were yourself diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. Is that correct?
I was not aware when I actually left the Marine Corps, or when I actually retired out of the Marine Corps, that I was dealing with a traumatic brain injury. I had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, I'd had my stroke, and I had some deficiencies in my mobile skills and limbs and things like that. It wasn't until actually I came back here and started going to the VA and things like that I was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury also. Now the thing is that was it a result of the stroke? Was it a result of some type of a blast abrasion that I received while I was in country? who's going to know? I mean, there were so many things that had taken place over that 2 or 3 year period, but that's when I was actually diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. And then, when I started working more closely with Dr. Gordon, that's where things really came to fruition for me that I was at one point dealing with a traumatic brain injury and not post-traumatic stress disorder. So.
Gotcha. Do you feel that that's likely a scenario that other veterans are experiencing when they get out, that they don't even know that they have the injury?
I would say that most of the veterans that are getting out are not aware that they have these issues until later on, when they get out and they start to try to do the things that they need to do to maybe get a job or function in a job type setting, that they start to realize that, hey, I'm having issues remembering things, or I'm having issues following these tasks because for whatever reason it may be. And then when they go out and they seek that those additional opinions from medical staff, that they start to finally figure out that, hey, I have suffered from a traumatic brain injury. That IED that went off 100 yards from my vehicle. Well, I didn't think it damaged me then, but now here I am 6 months down the road, and I've got all these unexplained issues, and I think that's kind of when they start to pop up.
Gotcha. And I was going to have you define what a traumatic brain injury is. I know that you're not yourself a doctor, or psychologist, or anything, but did you want to take a stab at it?
Well, I mean, what I can do is I can kind of read from here, if that's all right, and just kind of explain it from that. Would that be okay? Because I really wouldn't want to give an opinion. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I don't think I'm in the type of position that I should be able to do that. But I mean, a traumatic brain injury is a mechanical insult to the brain from an external mechanical force, which may lead to a temporary or permanent impairment in cognitive behavior or physical function. This may or may not be associated with alteration of consciousness. And then it goes on to say that, few conditions in medicine today are associated with more than varying definitions of confusion, inclusion, the TBI. This is due to large part to the most recent technologies advancements in the brain imaging, which are defining the brain's pathologies associated with trauma, and expanding the clinician's ability to diagnose, accurately treat the TBI. For nearly 400,000 veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts who currently suffer from TBI. So, I mean, the TBI is literally going to be a traumatic brain injury that causes those functions in the brains to be able to connect and fire again. What I know from listening to Dr. Gordon, that the great thing about traumatic brain injuries is that, or that the brain is that these connections can eventually find their pathways back to each other. It just takes time. And with a traumatic brain injury, these functions tend to come back just immediately. The brain doesn't kind of hear this little piece comes back and this little piece comes back. Once those functions have or those pathways have connected again, all of a sudden you just wake up and boom, everything works again. That's the way a traumatic brain injury works. And
you are a perfect example of that.
Really, and that's kind of where my expertise comes from. As I say, I'm not a doctor, but I've been through this situation, and I know what it feels like to not be able to tie your own shoe. I know what it's like to not be able to walk normally or function properly or speak properly or to stand there and have a conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden you just don't know what you're talking about anymore. Your thoughts are just gone. Your hands don't function properly, or you can't speak. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning or one day and all of a sudden it's back. All of a sudden I can move my hand again properly again. All of a sudden I can make that critical decision that I need to make and feel comfortable with it. All of a sudden, I don't have the weakness in my leg anymore. It's just there all of a sudden. Dr. Gordon, not only is she an expert in this, but she's also had her own traumatic brain injury, and she talks about how she fell off of a ladder. I believe it was hanging up Christmas decorations and banged her head. And this is a person who's been a doctor for years and years and years, and all of a sudden she couldn't speak. She couldn't talk at all.
Oh, wow.
And she was able to retrain her own brain through different types of with the computer and listening to music. I guess she even wrote some music while she was having issues. But she basically retrained her brain, and one day, all of a sudden, everything just came back.
Wow.
So pretty exciting. I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does. Yes, I wanted to make sure that we had some sort of a definition and more information about TBIs, because I think that there is a lot of lack of information and also false information out there about TBIs. And speaking of that, the false information, on the website, I saw that under the TBI tab, there's a sub menu under there that's myths about TBI. And you have a lot of these false myths out there surrounding traumatic brain injury, like you need to get knocked out to have a traumatic brain injury, or nobody should worry about a small concussion, or one of the other ones I was looking at was, I just have a headache, aspirin or Tylenol will help. And so it kind of goes into a lot more information. I think that's really great that you guys have put this out there.
Yeah, Dr. Gordon, she's got a pretty in-depth breakdown of exactly, some of the myths. What are the TBI screening tools that they utilize? The TBI study. Dr. Gordon actually paid to have a TBI study done up in New York with a bunch of veterans to actually prove what a TBI is and some of the tools that could be utilized to screen so she's got quite a bit of information on the website. If you go to that resurrectinglives.org, you can actually see that for yourself.
Yeah, I will make sure that I put information. I'll put the website address out on the show notes and give everybody information on where they could find that at the end of this interview. So I wanted to also talk about the 2015 employment initiative that you have going on. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, the employment pilot program that we have going on right now, we're working with Fort Bragg as our pilot program. That kicks off actually here this month. And what that basically is that we call it our CO to CEO program. This is where the commanding officers work directly with the CEOs of these different corporations. For example, some of them that we're utilizing is Cardinal Health has come on board and is committed to working with veterans. Scott's Miracle-Gro. Let's see. There's several out there. Honda of America, FIDA Freightliners. We work directly with Fort Bragg and the CEOs at Fort Bragg, along with the CEOs out here at those different corporations that I've spoke of, to literally change the way that these veterans are transitioning from the military installations out into the civilian sector. We literally want to get these veterans or these servicemen that are discharging. We want to get them jobs before they even leave the installation. One thing that I did learn when I was working with Wounded Warrior Regiment for the Marine Corps is that veterans need jobs, and a lot of times if they're sitting out there for 10 or 12 weeks or 4 or 5 or 6 months without employment, things tend to just get worse from there. So we want to get involved directly down there with the Wounded Warrior Transition Battalions and get these veterans jobs. So they literally discharge one day and start a job the next.
And so this is jobs for people that have traumatic brain injury or jobs for veterans transitioning out altogether?
Well, when the program started, the program was really solely set on working with veterans. And obviously, we don't want to turn anybody away. But it was solely to work with veterans with traumatic brain injuries. And the reason being is because that's what Dr. Gordon specializes in.
Right.
She specializes in the brain. So when she went down there and introduced the program, it quickly caught on. There was some deficiencies in the transition programs at a lot of these bases, and those of us that have been in the military are aware of that. So when she went down there and introduced this voluntary program for the traumatic brain injuries, the bases were quickly to jumped on board and said, hey, not only do we want to help the traumatic brain injury, we'd love to use this program for for all of our veterans, and that's kind of where the program went from there.
Oh, great! So the employers that you mentioned, is it only for the certain ones that you guys have already reached out for, or if there's other employers that are in the Fort Bragg area right now? I think you guys are looking to expand from there. But right now, this pilot program is Fort Bragg. So if there's other employers in the area and they want to get involved, are they welcome to contact you about that as well?
Oh, most definitely. We're more than happy to work with any employer that would like to work with veterans. And again, although we specialize, Resurrecting Lives specializes with traumatic brain injuries, Fort Bragg has actually initiated a program down there to actually help in transitioning with those veterans out into the employment sectors too. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I think Fort Bragg, and obviously this isn't a direct quote, but I believe Fort Bragg last year they discharged 8,000 veterans last year, 8,000 military personnel just from Fort Bragg last year. And obviously, I mean, that's just, that could be veterans that are disabled, veterans that were wounded, veterans that are just getting out, rotating out, but 8,000. And that's just one base.
Wow.
So there's a lot of opportunity to get involved and employ these veterans.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite a lot. So for these employers, are you doing anything specific with them in order to educate them on traumatic brain injury for the employees that they will be getting?
Well, yes, when it comes to working with the Veteran Employment Initiative, obviously, like we said, we want to provide that gainful employment for those military personnel separating, out of the military. And we do. We like to work with the corporations and kind of give them a little breakdown of what TBI is, some of the things that they may need to keep in mind, some small type potential issues, that the veterans may have when transitioning from the military installation out into their employment sector. And those could, when it comes to TBI, I mean, that could be issues with maybe a little bit of fatigue or maybe some memory problems, maybe some processing issues every once in a while, a little hypervigilance. If they've been out in a combat zone, they may have a little bit of hypervigilance, especially towards other noises and things like that. Especially with TBI, bright lights tend to cause things like issues and things like that, and emotional issues. These just kind of come along with some of the things that these veterans are dealing with when they leave. Obviously, we want to keep the medical side of the house as separate as possible when it comes to hiring these veterans. That's why we try to work with the employer and the veteran, and we literally just establish a relationship with this veteran. They get an iPad. We work closely with them as they go through this process because we want them to get involved with the VA. We want them to make their appointments. We want them to get down there and get that good, solid establishment so that none of these issues that they may be having go out into that workforce.
That's great. I really like what you guys are doing there because I think a lot of veterans who get out who might be having some of these symptoms of TBI, they might not want to go and try to find a job right away because they're worried about what's going to happen when I, start experiencing some of these symptoms and I'm at work? They're just going to fire me, or this is never going to work out. But if they know that the employers are already educated on what to expect, then they're going to be a little bit more lenient and help you work through that. So I think that's really great what you guys are doing.
Well, and we try to utilize what's called a team concept. Obviously, it's really going to be the deciding factor is on how many personnel that employer needs to hire. But we try to send them out in teams of at least 2 up to 4. This would be the best way to do things. What it allows them to do is to kind of work off of each other while they're going through this process. Get them out to the employer. They have that team concept where they can go out and slowly initiate themselves back into that active workday. With veterans that have been with the transition universities or transition battalions that have been wounded or may have TBI or whatever, a lot of them haven't been working a normal 40-hour work week. Because they've been, going through the transition process. They've been going through medical. They may have whatever, to assist whatever health issues that they may have. So the last thing we want to do is just push them right out into a 40-hour work week at that employer's. So what we do is we try to break them up into, or try to put them into a team where you've got at least 2 so they can kind of piggyback off of each other. This allows one to work while maybe one has to go to a VA appointment or whatever it may be, and bounce back and forth. It's also good for their support group. Just as well as I do, being a veteran, nobody understands a veteran like a veteran.
Absolutely.
So it would be great if we could do that team concept. That's what we'd like to do.
That sounds great. And Eric, I wanted to kind of get a walkthrough. Let's say that there's an imaginary person. His name is Jimmy, and he was deployed to, we'll say, Afghanistan, where he experienced a traumatic brain injury. And now he's getting out, and he wants to get involved. He's listening to this podcast right now. He hears it, and he says, "This sounds great. I'm getting out next month, and I'm going to need a job." Can you give me a walkthrough of what Jimmy will experience when he's going through the organization?
Well, the first thing Jimmy would have to do is he would have to get in touch with his his veterans or his Wounded Warrior Transition Service officer that they have down at the Wounded Warrior Transition Systems, and he would have to show that interest that he was interested in volunteering to work with Resurrecting Lives and their employers. We would then go down. We would sit down and basically interview him for that position, whether it would be for, say, I don't know, for example, maybe Cardinal Health or Scott's Lawn. And then at that point, he would decide, if that's what he would want to do. We would determine where he's going to be going back to. Is he going to go back to Ohio? Is he going to go back to his permanent duty or his station prior, where he was stationed prior to enlistment? Mm-hmm. And then we would work along with him, getting his obviously getting the resume together and things like that, and get that information to that employer. Then they would probably do a secondary interview with him at some point and determine whether or not this would be a good match for him. And that's kind of how the process is working. He would be issued an iPad so that we could keep in touch with him. With myself or Dr. Gordon. And then follow him through the process. We would establish a relationship with him, and we would literally track him or her during that 1 year period or 2 year period until they were successfully employed, which we consider a successful employment, that he would be there for at least 2 years or more.
Great. It's a good walkthrough. I can picture it perfectly. And one last thing, Eric, that I wanted to talk about before we got into the final three questions was I saw on the website that there was a documentary. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, Operation Resurrection. And I will send out the link for that. But the documentary Operation Resurrection it's a documentary that Dr. Chris Ann Gordon put together. Dr. Gordon got involved in this when one of her friend's sons actually was killed, and she quickly realized that people needed to know what was going on with some of the struggles that these veterans and families were going through. So she put a documentary together, kind of highlighting what these veterans are going through, some of the legal issues that they were having because of some of the traumatic brain injuries and things like this, and put it all into a video. And it's called Operation Resurrection, and it actually interviews some of the veterans that were wounded while they were out in Iraq or Afghanistan. Kind of walks through what TBI is, how it's affecting our veterans, and how difficult it is for them to once they've been diagnosed to just get out there and get reestablished back out in the civilian world. And but it's called Operation Resurrection.
Excellent. Well, I will be sure to put that in the show notes as well, and people can find out more about that documentary.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to go over before we get into the final three questions?
I can't really think of anything offhand.
Okay.
At this moment.
All right. We will jump right in then. Question number 1. Who would you like to hear on a future episode of Veteran Resource Podcast?
I think would really be beneficial would probably be Dr. Chris Ann Gordon. I think if we could make some time for her and get her on here, I think she could really give you an in-depth look at exactly what TBI is and what her vision is.
I think that would really be good. She sounds very interesting from everything that I've seen online about her.
Well, I just tell you now, and turn down your mic because she gets pretty excited.
Perfect. My kind of guest. Yeah. Okay, question number 2, Eric. What upcoming project has you fired up right now?
I tell you, I'm really fired up about this 2015 employment initiative. I think if we can get veterans jobs, I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems. There's nothing more that gives somebody worth than being able to go out and take care of their own self. And let's face it, we're military personnel. We're not used to being taken care of. We're used to taking care of other people.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. And the final question in this one is the brain stretcher.
Mm-hmm.
If you woke up tomorrow and found out that somebody made an anonymous donation of $10 million to your organization, what would you do with it?
Whew. Wow, $10 million? Oh, yeah, I'll tell you, we've had to scrub pennies together for so long, I wouldn't know what to do with $10 million right off the bat. I tell you what, I think it'd be good use, though. We've got a lot of iPads that we need to buy because we expect to help hundreds and hundreds of veterans. So I guess that would be a good start there. I might be able to move out of the basement over here. Use that. But no, that's a great question. I think though that would be a good that money would be utilized to probably educate employers and just the civilian sectors on what exactly TBI is. That it's not a threat to you. The traumatic brain injury is a medical condition that can be fixed, and that these veterans have a lot to offer to our society, and we deserve to get them involved. And I think education would probably be one of the biggest things that we'd use that $10 million with.
That sounds great. And now for that person out there with the $10 million who just heard that and would love to put it to good use with your organization, how can they or anybody else get in contact with you or with the organization?
Well, I think the best way to do it would probably go to Resurrecting Lives Foundation, resurrectinglives.org, and go to our contacts page and give us your information. Send us your information, and we will gladly reach out to you. And I think that would be the easiest way.
Outstanding. I will make sure that, like I said, I'll be putting all of these links in the show notes so everybody could find it nice and easy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eric, for this interview. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really love the fact that we're getting this information out. Our slogan is "Resurrect a Hero, you're going to strengthen the nation." Resurrect a hero, strengthen the nation. So,
love it. All right, well, thank you, Eric, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right, hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Veteran Resource Podcast. This was episode 21, and that means that you could find the show notes for this episode at veteranpodcast.com/021. And I'm going to have all of the links that we mentioned during the interview there, make it nice and easy for you to get over to Resurrecting Lives Foundation. And I'll also have links to their Facebook page and their Twitter page so you can make sure that you get connected. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in episode 22.